My name is Scott Strauss. I'm a retired detective from the New York City Police Department. On September 11th, 2001, I was assigned to the Emergency Service Unit, Squad 1, which covers Lower Manhattan. On September 10th, I went to work to do a midnight tour. I didn't sleep much on September 10th prior to going into work, but at 11:30, I was on the floor on Monday night, ready to go to work. I worked with Police Officer Kenny Winkler, and we did relatively uneventful midnight tour. At 8 o'clock in the morning, I left to go home, and Kenny Winkler stayed in quarters a little later than I did. On my way home to Long Island on the train, I read September 10th's paper because I had brought it with me, and then I was listening to the radio on my Walkman. Walkman is a little radio for back in the day, before iPads and iPods. And I heard them talking about, the radio show was talking about a plane that had struck the World Trade Center. And I thought it was kind of odd. I couldn't see what they were talking about. Obviously, it was a radio. I thought it was a joke in the beginning of it. And then their tone was very, very serious. So I'm trying to imagine how that possibly could happen. It was a beautiful, beautiful September day. And there's plenty of plane traffic in the air, but there's no way that something could happen like this unintentional. So I thought it might have been a small plane that hit the Trade Center. Maybe there was a medical emergency on for the pilot, what have you. I got into my car and I raced home, get into the house, and it was the first day that both of my boys were going to school full time. So I was actually looking forward to getting some sleep that day. Until 2:30, 3 o'clock when they would I'd get them off the bus. My wife was getting ready for work. I ran into the house, turned the TV on. I yelled to her that a plane had hit the Trade Center. She said, "You're kidding me." She came in and we both saw the second plane hit. At that time I knew we were under attack, and I knew I had to get back to work. So I ran into my room. I grabbed some clothes, threw them in a bag, hopped into my car, and I raced into Manhattan. I got to my building on 21st Street between 2nd and 3rd Avenue, as did all of my coworkers who were off duty at the time. The people who relieved me, the police officers who relieved me doing the day tour on September 11th were already down there, already down to Trade Center. Including Kenny Winkler, who, when this job came in, even though he was in shorts and a t-shirt, he hopped on the truck and our big rescue truck, and went downtown and to give them a hand. Other off-duty police officers from my unit were coming into work, and we were getting equipment together. Our building is next to the 13th precinct, and the 13th precinct has an indoor firing range in it. The range officers from the range came over to us and asked us for, some heavy weapons. The New York City Police Department's Emergency Service Unit is the SWAT and the rescue team of the city. So we handle everything from cats stuck in trees, plane crashes, subway derailments, car accidents, hostage jobs, barricades, you name it, we're there. So we have special weapons. So the range officers came up and they asked us to give us, they can have some special weapons to protect the city. We all knew we were under attack, and we were the only defense there. Military didn't exist in Manhattan at the time. It was the New York City Police Department was going to defend the city. So we gave them some of our machine guns and some of our rifles. We grabbed some other rifles and machine guns and additional rescue equipment, piled it into our trucks and spare cars, and we headed downtown. On our way down, there was, I think, 8 police officers and one of our sergeants, Sergeant Gene O'Connor. We stop off at this construction site, and one of the towers had fallen already on our way down there. He stops, we pull over at a construction site, and he gets out and he's talking to the construction workers. And they had no clue what was going on. They're busy doing their thing. They were either building a building or taking one down. I don't remember. And the sergeant's like, he's talking very cavalier to them, saying, "Hey guys, one of the trade centers towers collapsed. we're going to need some of your equipment. So if you could pack it up and start heading down there, it would be really appreciated. And that's the way he's talking. And we're like, come on, Sarge, let's get down there. We got people to save. Let's get down there. And he's like, all right, we'll get these guys down there to help us. We'll get there. And to this day, and I saw him a couple of weeks ago on September 11th, we make fun of him for pulling us over because we wanted to get down there and start saving people. We make fun of him, and we also thank him because he saved our lives. We pulled up downtown just as the second tower finished collapsing. If he didn't stop to talk to those guys, God only knows what could have happened. So we make fun of him and we thank him in the same breath. So we get downtown, and they tell us to go to City Hall Park. So we go to City Hall Park, and they had trying to get our unit to regroup. And our unit is a citywide unit. Everybody in the city that was working that morning was there from my unit. And they're telling everybody on the radio to get to City Hall Park. As our co-workers from our unit are coming to City Hall Park, they're covered in debris, hurt, bleeding. Couple had broken bones, and we're just taking care of them and saying, hey, did you see Mike? Did you see Joe? Did you see Steve? We're asking for our friends that aren't coming out. So like, no, I was with them, but I don't know what happened. And so, well, okay, we have a job to do, and hopefully they're okay. They lined us up. Meaning our supervisors lined us up, and we had two objectives that day. One is to protect the city, and the other is to continue the search and rescue operation for anybody who's trapped in the debris. And the supervisors just went down the line and said, okay, you 5 guys are on tactics, you guys 5 guys are on rescue, you 5 guys are on tactics, you 5 guys are on rescue. And the guys that were assigned tactics they grabbed our special heavy weapons, our machine guns, rifles, heavy vests, helmets, and they lined out a perimeter around City Hall Park and around the Trade Center to prevent another attack. If we had no idea what was going to happen. We don't know if the ground troops are going to come in or what the next attack is going to be. We had absolutely no idea. So I was assigned to the rescue end of it. And we said our goodbyes. We got our assignments. You go to this area, that team goes to this area, and that team goes to over that area. And we grabbed what rescue equipment we had, and we started going into the pile, which we still call the Trade Center. And the Trade Center morphed into, for maybe days, weeks, it was still called the Trade Center. And then it morphed into the pile. And then you're going down to the pile, see at the pile. And then later on, it morphed into Ground Zero. But for a long time, it was just called the Trade Center and then the pile. So we were assigned one area, and we were trying to search, and we were climbing into the holes and debris pile. And any opening and voids that we could find, we were crawling down into, trying to locate anybody that could possibly be alive. We didn't find anybody. We searched the whole day, and there was points where we were in the area below the Trade Center. It's massive down in there, and everything had collapsed on top of it. And we had crawled down a very long escalator, stairway, because everything had collapsed on top of it. You couldn't walk down it. So we crawled down this very long escalator. We got to the bottom, we crawled through some other tiny openings, and we got to an area where we could almost walk around in. And we were hearing gunfire from up above us. And a police officer's natural instinct is to go to that gunfire. In this situation, we couldn't. We knew that the officers, my fellow officers that were assigned to tactics in the perimeter, were up there. We were hoping that whatever they were involved in, they were winning, so we could continue to do our job and search for survivors. We turned out later that it was some of ammunition that was burning off in some of the World Trade Center buildings that were on fire. There were other law enforcement entities that were in those buildings, and it had a cache of bullets and ammunition and weapons. And I guess they were burning through and discharging. But it was unnerving like you couldn't imagine, to hear gunfire and think that we're being overrun by some foreign country or something. And because we didn't have radios, we didn't have TVs. We come out of that pile and we go into another area where we're finding dead people. We're finding people who are deceased. We're finding parts of bodies, but nobody was alive. We continued searching all day long. During the course of the morning, we're hearing fighter jets fly overhead. People who were at home or at work who are not involved in the operation that we're in had the luxury of watching TV and listening to the commentators on TV, giving the latest information as best they could get it. We had no idea those jets were ours. We didn't know if there were other civilian airliners crashing into wherever, if they were, again, another foreign entity with fighter jets, and we're having our militaries having a dogfight over in New York City. We had no idea what was happening. We just had to focus on our job and hope and pray that the rest of our team and the military, who was probably obviously in the air, we found out later that was them, were doing their jobs to protect the rest of the city. So as the course of the day went on, we came to hear and understand what was transpiring in the morning. But again, we weren't finding any survivors. At about 5:20, I think it was, we're climbing around some of the piles, still searching in voids and things, and building 7 collapses. So we were pulled off the pile, told to regroup and reorganize, and to take an accountability in case we lost anybody else. We still haven't got a firm list. I wasn't aware of a firm list of how many people from my unit were missing or unaccounted for. So we were on the south side of Liberty Street in an office building, just waiting for our next assignment. Now, we were part of the organized rescue effort was pulled off that pile when Building 7 collapsed. So the reason why I say organized is because there were people that were down there that weren't part of the New York City Fire Department, New York City Police Department. They weren't part of an organized group or an entity. They were military people, Con Ed people. They were civilians who were just climbing around the pile. Just either they were dazed and confused, or they were looking for survivors if they had tried to help. So we were pulled off the pile, regroup, and as we're waiting for our next assignment, one of our sergeants, Sergeant Timmy Adrat, excuse me, says, grabs a group of us and says, come on, listen, if we can't go on into the Trade Center, we'll search the buildings on the perimeter of it. So we went on the south side of Liberty Street, and we were going into a building that was clawed from the debris of the Trade Center that had collapsed. It just ripped, shredded the front of the building. So we wanted to make sure that nobody was injured in that building, since we couldn't technically go onto what we called the pile later on. We were climbing in and out of that building as best we could. And we were writing on the wall, on a window, or on a door, NYPD, issue, 9/11, and the time. This way, anybody else coming after us would know that it was already searched once, and then they could search it again to do a secondary search. So we came out of the building, and it had to be around 8 o'clock or so by now. And the pile of debris that was in front of this building, I believe we went into and came out of that building that we searched was about 2 or 3 stories high. We didn't walk on the ground floor. You couldn't because of all of the debris. We came out of the building onto this pile, and a firefighter yells to us, and he says, "Hey guys, you got 2 cops that are hurt in the pile over there." And we had thought, because it happened all day long, we had thought that they were off-duty police officers or police officers who came in after the towers collapsed, like we did, like I did, and just sprained an ankle, broke a leg. I don't want to make it sound insignificant, but it was happening all day long. We were climbing on these piles, and guys were tripping, getting hurt, twisted an ankle, spraining a shoulder, because it was just treacherous. And you would stand on a column or an I-beam, and it would start to shift, and you would slide down it. It was absolutely treacherous. So we thought it was going to be a surface rescue, so to speak, where we would just run in there and grab these guys and get them out. So now the pile, the debris pile was still on fire. This is, again, September 11th, about 8 o'clock at night. And it's getting dark. It's dark because of the smoke. But so we just started climbing as fast as we could over the debris pile into wherever we were headed. And that's all we knew, is that this firefighter says, they're over there somewhere. And he waved with his arm and pointed that direction. Police officer Greg Welch was in front of me. He's from my unit. We're climbing over these beams, jumping from I-beam to I-beam. Some of them are hot, some of them are slippery, and we're sliding down, trying to figure out where our next step would be to get to where we had to go. And the only place that we were headed to was a flashlight that was waving off in the distance back and forth. I don't know why. That was the only thing out there through the smoke and the dust that we could see. So we figured that had to be that. So Greg slices his leg up pretty good. And we stop. He asked me if he's okay. He said, yeah, keep going. I'm all right. I'll be fine. Keep going. He's got blood pouring out of his leg. He says, just keep going. Get those guys and get them out of there. So we climbing over the debris. There was a group of us there. And we come up to this person who was waving his flashlight. And he could have been the Pope. I have no idea who he was. I don't have any idea what he looked like, what he was wearing. All I know that he was in the middle of this dust and this smoke, waving a flashlight. So we come up to him, and I couldn't tell you anything about him other than that he had a flashlight. And and I said, well, hey, what do you got? He says, I got 2 cops in this hole. So I look in this hole, and this hole is about the size of a manhole cover, a manhole in the street. So I climbed down into that hole, and my entire group was we're police officers, so we have our gun belts on. We had rope harnesses on because we use those when we climb bridges. To people looking to jump off of bridges, or if there's a construction accident, we wear these harnesses. And we had them doing our search and rescue operation because we didn't know what we were going to go into and may have needed them. And we also were wearing air packs like the firefighters have to go into burning buildings. So we had a lot of equipment on us. So I climbed with that equipment on into that hole. One of my fellow police officers, Patrick McGee, comes in to the hole, and a former paramedic from the unorganized, like I mentioned earlier, the organized versus the unorganized search team. He has former paramedic Chuck Sirica comes in the hole. Where he came from, I don't know. He was, heard wherever he was at home, heard about the issue. The Trade Center had gotten struck. He puts on a sweatshirt that says medic on the back of it, and he came in and started helping. He found us, and we found him. We all mingled at this one, met up at this one point, and there was a Marine, a former Marine in that hole where I had dropped down to Sergeant Carnes, and he says, "Yeah, I got 2 cops in here. We can't. I don't know how we're gonna get to them." So Chuck sees a very small opening on the right. He climbs down, comes around the other side, and he says, "Hey, you can get to him from here, but you're not going to fit down here with all your stuff on." So Patty and I were taking our gear off. I take off my air pack. I take off my my rope harness, and we just leave it in the pile. And I take off my gun belt. And that was a defining moment for me. A police officer never gives up his or her gun, never. You never give up your gun. When things go bad, that's your last resort. That's the only thing you have to help you out of a normal police situation. This is not a normal police situation. I know that I'm not going to need my gun in that hole. I'm not going after a robber or a murderer. I'm going in to save somebody. But it was just the idea that I gave up my gun and I had nothing. Then it was at that moment that I had a feeling that I was going to die in that hole. I gave up that gun and I crawled down into that hole. And it was about 30 feet down on an angle. And incredibly, incredibly tight spots. We're squeezing through I-beams that were laying on top of each other and debris, and some of them were burning hot from the fire that was still raging underneath us. And they were trying to get past them as quick as we can, and there was no way to turn around to get out if we needed to. If you can picture yourself going down on an angle through a debris pile, if you can even imagine that, you couldn't back out. So as I'm climbing down into this hole, to myself, I'm saying to myself, I'm apologizing to my two boys, Brian and Christopher, for getting killed. I didn't think I was coming out of that hole alive. I asked them to take care of Mom, do the best they can in school, and make me proud. I get down to the bottom where Chuck is, and we see police officer Dominic Pizzullo from the Port Authority. He's deceased. He's crushed up against the wall. As it turns out, he survived the first collapse, was buried in the first collapse, unburies himself. He was with a team of 5 other Port Authority officers. He's unburies himself, and he's talking with Sergeant John McLaughlin and Police Officer Will Jimeno from the Port Authority Police Department. And he says, listen, I'm going to go up and I'm going to go out and I'll get you help. And the sergeant said, no, don't go. You got to dig us out because you'll never find your way back. And he's right. You couldn't find your way back to that location. If Dominic had gotten out of that pile and went to get help, the World Trade Center site is massive. There was no way you would be able to figure out where that hole was again. So he did the right thing. He stayed there and tried to dig out Will and John. Unfortunately, the other building came down on top of him, and a piece of cement came through an opening and crushed him up against a wall. And through the course of the day, he slowly bled out. When we got down to where he was, we had to climb over Officer Pizzullo, and then we had about 10 feet, and then we had to come back to where we were about another 20 feet to where we came from. So kind of like a downward U shape. And when we got our eyes on Will Jimeno from the Port Authority Police Department, he was on his back, completely encased in rubble. It looked like he was poured out of a dump truck. He's on his back. The only thing that you could see of him was his head and his right arm. His right arm was free. He had released his handcuffs. He pulled his handcuffs out during the course of the day and was scraping away at the rubble, trying to free himself with his one hand. And then he drops his handcuffs and they fell out of reach, and he couldn't grab them anymore. John McLaughlin, Sergeant John McLaughlin from the Port Authority Police Department, he was buried further in. We didn't know he even existed at that moment. All we could see and talk to was Will. So we crawled into Will, and to get to Will, you had to go through an opening that's no bigger than the chair you're probably sitting on now. And the area where Dominic Pizzullo was is a confined, crushed area where you had to crouch down, and it was no bigger than the space below a table, the average size table. But only one person can fit at a time to work on Will Jimeno. So Chuck and I, took turns working on Will. You couldn't take much longer, a long amount of time to be in that hole with Will because of the choking smoke and the heat of the fire. So we would have to crawl in on our side and with our hands above our head, pull ourselves into Will and scratch away at the rubble and take whatever was falling down away from him. And we would push it down past our chest out to Patty McGee and Chuck. And Patty would throw it down this elevator shaft next to where Dominic was. We would keep doing that. And then when I couldn't take it any longer, Chuck would go in. And when Chuck couldn't take it any longer, he'd come out and I'd go in, and where our place of refuge, or where we took our break, so to speak, was next to Dominic. And in that crushed area, no bigger than a table space, on space underneath the table. Will kept saying, hurry up, you got to get to my partner. You got to get to my partner. The only person we saw in that hole at the time was Dominic. So we're thinking that he's talking about Officer Pizzullo. And if he's saying, you got to get to my partner, I'm saying to myself, he doesn't know he's dead. And I don't want to tell him he's dead, because I don't want that to be another cause Will to get angry or to lose hope or to get, to become emotional. He just kept saying, you got to get to my partner. You got to get to my partner. Don't worry about me. Get to my partner. And then I'm like, I told Will, I said, Will, listen, the way the debris fell, we have to get to you first. Then we'll get to your partner. I didn't want to tell him he was dead. So we're working on Will, and then we hear another voice out of the rubble. And this voice is talking to me like I'm talking to you. And he goes, hey guys, how you doing? And I stop, I said, who's that? And Will says, that's my partner. And I said, I thought that was your partner. He says, no, that's Dominic, he's dead. And I was like, oh my God, who's that? And he says, it's John McLaughlin, Sergeant John McLaughlin. And I said, John McLaughlin. I said, it's Scott Strauss. And I had met him years prior. The small world that this world is, my partner in the police department, Gerard Kirchler, grew up with Sergeant John McLaughlin. And I met Sergeant John McLaughlin with Gerard when we were at a combined training center with the Port Authority Police Department a couple of years before we were in the Trade Center on 9/11. So I said, Sergeant, Scott Strauss. He goes, hey, Scott, how you doing? I go, how am I doing? How are you holding up? He says, get Will out, and I'll be all right. So thankfully, I wasn't lying to Will. It was real. We had to get Will out because John was buried further in past him. So we're digging out Will, and we come to see that Will is wearing an air pack like we were wearing. The paramedic Chuck had a pair of scissors. I cut off his straps for the air pack, and I'm yanking it and trying to yank it out. And again, I'm on my side with my hands over my head, and I'm trying to yank this air pack out. I got it out. I pass it down to Patty. Patty sends me what we call extenders. What we have on our rope rescue harness is what we use when we climb bridges to keep ourselves attached to the bridge so we don't fall off it when we're trying to get somebody down who's looking to jump off it. So he hands me the extenders, and I wrap them around Will's chest. And Will's a pretty big guy. And I yell to everybody, hey, we got him out. So Chuck, I can't get him out. I can't, I physically don't have the strength or the leverage to get him out. So Chuck comes in with me, and we're chest to chest in this hole on our sides with our hands above our heads. And we're both pulling on Will, trying to get him out of this hole. And Will is screaming that his leg is hurt. His leg's pinned. And so Chuck backs out. I crawl in on top of Will into this tiny opening, which couldn't have been more than the diameter of an air bottle, maybe 10 inches, 12 inches in diameter. I squeezed myself on Will's chest, and above this cement slab that was on top of him that had God knows what above it, the rest of the 210-story buildings above him on it. And I see that there's a cinder block wall pinning his left leg, his femur, down into the rubble pile. And I couldn't scrape away underneath it. So I back out of the hole, and I get back to where Patty and Chuck are and Officer Pizzullo. And I said, guys, there's a brick wall, there's a cinder block wall on his leg. I need like an air hammer or something. So they're trying to locate an air hammer, a jacking hammer, and they couldn't find one because a lot of the rescue equipment that was brought there in the beginning of 9/11, the morning, was burned or crushed. It doesn't exist. So they're trying to scramble and trying to locate things. They said, how about a set of airbags? I said, no, the airbags aren't going to work. I can't get them in there. They said, how about the jaws of life, which we use to cut open cars' doors with when a car accidents? I said, that's not going to fit. It's too big. They said, how about a battery operated one? And I had not seen a battery operated jaws of life. So I said, well, if you think it's going to fit, I'll try it. So they send down this battery operated jaws of life, and it's a heavy piece of equipment. And I push it up into the hole over to Will. Now I have to get this big piece of equipment on the other side of Will. And I got to fit it through that small opening. And I'm taking it, I'm rolling it up onto Will's stomach and his chest. And I'm jamming it through this opening, this space above his chest. And I'm hurting Will. And Will's he's in pain. I'm causing him pain. I'm apologizing. And I'm saying, sorry, Will, I just got to get this over to the other side. He said, don't you worry about me. Do whatever you got to do. Get to that sergeant. Got to get to the sergeant. I get this tool to the other side of him. And I climb on top of Will now. And I'm leaning over his stomach and his chest. And I get myself crushed in that opening. And I'm leaning on him and using him as leverage. And I'm trying to get this tool down into the right spot by his leg so I can lift this cinder block wall off his leg. And I'm hurting Will again. And he's having difficulty breathing because I'm laying on his chest and I'm crushing him. And I'm sorry, Will. I keep apologizing to him. And he says, hey, don't worry about me, please. Get to the sergeant. You got to do whatever. He's going to die if you don't get to him. We didn't think we were going to get either of them out. These guys were so packed in and crushed that we didn't think number one, we'd ever get out. The rest of the building would just come down on us. And building 4 and 5 were right near us, 2 9-story office buildings, and they were burning from top to bottom. And they were starting to collapse on all the rescuers that were above us now, because word got out what we were doing, and there was hundreds of rescue workers above us, and it was starting to collapse on them. So the firefighters couldn't control the fire in the hole that we were in, and the building starting to collapse on top of us from outside. And they were yelling down to us, guys, you got to get out of there. The buildings are collapsing on top of us. You got to get out. And Will looked at me and he says, you're not leaving me, are you? And I said, no, I'm not leaving you, Will. Did I want to? Yeah, I wanted to get out of there. But I couldn't. How could I leave him and go hug my kids when I let him to die? So I couldn't leave him. So I told him I wasn't leaving. Patty and Chuck weren't leaving. So that gave us all a little bit of strength. We fed off of each other and we just stayed there, and regardless of what they were telling us from up above. I don't think I could have lived with myself if I left them. I get this jaws of life back into place, and I back out, and I tell Patty and Chuck to get out. I said, guys, I have no idea what's going to happen here with this. When I start to move those jaws and I start to spread and move that cinder block wall, I don't know what it's holding up, and it could all come crashing down on us. You guys might as well back out, and Will and I just get through this. And they refused to leave. They said, no, we came in. We came in together, we're coming out together. So Will made a joke, and he's like, hey, can you stop the small talk and get me out of here? So I go back in the hole, and I said, Will, I look back over to him, and I said, well, I have no idea what this is going to do. But if we get buried, there's hundreds of guys above us that know exactly where we are, and they're going to start digging for us right away. He says, just get to the sergeant, get me out of the way to get to the sergeant. So I operate the tool, and the spread of the tool isn't big enough. I back out, and I say, crap, it's not working. I don't have enough spread. So Chuck says, hey, let me go take a look. Chuck climbs in there, and why I couldn't figure this out, I don't know. I did this for a living. But Chuck took some debris and some rubble, and he scraped it into that area and made the opening smaller where the jaws of life were. And he backs out and he said, try this. So I crawl back in on top of Will, and I operate the tool, and the cinder block wall cracks and a piece falls off. His leg, I think, is free. I back out. Chuck and I comes in with me, and we're trying to pull him out. And Will's saying, no, my foot's bent, my foot's bent. I crawl back in, and Will is saying now, just cut off my leg. Just cut, he says, Scott, cut off my leg. I said, well, I'm not cutting your leg off. We're going to get you out of here in one piece. She says, cut my leg off and get to the sergeant. Now, the sergeant was fading in and out. He was talking to us and not talking to us. And there was a point where Patty McGee was, who is Irish as the day is long. Patrick McGee, he's born on March 17th, St. Patrick's Day. He's in the New York City Police Pipe Band. You don't get much more Irish than that. And he's talking to John McLaughlin and another Irish guy. And he's calling them Irish Eyes. He's like, hey, Irish Eyes, how you holding up? How you doing? At times, you can tell in his voice that he was fading out. And at other times, he wouldn't answer. And there was one point where he wasn't answering. And it was upsetting Will. We had all thought that he had passed away. So I look back at Patty and I'm like, I shake my head no, like, don't say it, don't call him anymore. And Will is like, Sarge, you there, Sarge? Don't give up now, Sarge, don't give up. And he says, Scott, cut my leg off, get to the sergeant. He says, Will, I don't have anything to cut your leg off with. And with that, one of the Marine who was above us, who found them originally, slides down his big Marine knife and he goes, here, use this. And I'm like, use this to cut his leg off? You want me to hack this man's leg off? I said, I'm not hacking his leg off. We'll get you out of here in one piece. What I found out later was that they had, during the course of this operation, they had assembled some medical staff, doctors and things above us, and they were ready to talk us through amputating Will's leg to get him out of that hole. I crawled back on top of Will because I wasn't looking to cut his leg off. Certainly not with a knife or with anything. I crawled back on top of Will and I go down towards his knees. And as weird as this sounds, we were making jokes in that hole. Gallows humor, cops humor, whatever you want to call it. We were talking. Will said his wife was a good cook. And I said, she better be for the barbecue she's going to have for us when we get you out of here. We're talking about family, we're talking about whatever in the whole as we're doing our work. And we're, to give you an idea of that the environment we were in, there were times that I was on top of Will face to face and I couldn't see him because of the smoke and the dust. We were dry heaving in that hole. We were gagging in that hole. It was very difficult to breathe in. And it was just a terrible, absolutely terrible place to be. But again, we had that cop's humor going with us. So there came a point where I came down on top of him and I moved down towards his feet and I'm crushing him. I'm on top of him and my head is by his knees and my knees are by his head. And I said to him, hey, Will, you couldn't be a female cop? And we kind of laughed. And I see that I have a tiny flashlight and I see that there's a piece of rebar that's crushing his foot. So I yelled back to Chuck and Patty that, I'm trying to get his foot's stuck by a piece of rebar and I can't get it out. And I have my hands up in front of me and I'm trying to get down to his ankle and trying to pull his foot out by his pants. And I'm crushing Will. This man is in tremendous amount of pain. And the only thing he's thinking about is getting to the sergeant. He's in agony and he's hurting and I'm hurting him more by being on top of him. And I said, listen, I yelled back to Chuck, I can't do it with both I need another set of hands in here. So Chuck crawls in as far as he can go and he's stretching one arm in. And I said, all right, just grab his pants leg and try to pull on it. Both of us were trying to pull on his pants leg. We couldn't get him out. Patty, I yelled back to Patty. I said, you have something I can move this rebar with? He finds this perfect length, perfect bend piece of rebar. And he slides this over to us. He says, try this. It was perfect. I put this piece of rebar in and I'm lifting up the rebar, jamming it in off of Will's foot. And I'm trying to pull his pants leg out and I couldn't do both at the same time. So Chuck comes back in, he's reaching his arm down as far as he could go. He's grabbing his pants leg. And I said, all right, Chuck, when I tell you to pull on his leg. So I lift the rebar up, Chuck pulls on his leg. Will is screaming in pain. We crawl out. Chuck and I dragging Will out into the opening where Dominic is. Now, all of this time, which is about 3 hours or so gone by, while the rescuers outside of the hole were digging down to us, Patty was digging his way out. There's no way we were going to be able to get Will or John or whoever in that hole, even us, out the same way we came in. It just wasn't going to happen. So they were making another opening. They passed down a Stokes basket. We put Patty into the, we put Will into the Stokes basket, wrap him up, and we send them topside. I go back into the hole and I'm talking to John. I said, John, listen, I am physically shot. I am no good to you. There's a fresh team coming down in this hole. They're going to get you out, Will. John, we know where you are. Will's okay. He's on his way to the hospital. We're coming for you now. He said, thanks, Scott. I appreciate it. And it was incredible. He was in tremendous pain, absolutely incredible, buried like you wouldn't believe. I crawled topside again, and the first time in three and a half hours that I was out of that hole. And all I wanted to do was take a deep breath and to stand up, stand upright. We were, like I said, we were in that small crevices, for three and a half hours. I get topside and I can stand up, but you can't take a deep breath. The smoke up there was just as bad as it was in the hole. So Kenny Winkler, who I worked with on the Midnight, who is the first time I'm seeing him now, I said, Kenny, I said, personal friend, it's John McLaughlin in the hole, get him out. And he said, yeah, no problem, Scott. And I don't know why I said that, right? Like, if he wasn't a personal friend, they were going to walk away. I just said it. But it changed things, I think it means a little bit more. You got a personal stake in this thing. Not that we would give up anybody else just because we don't know them. But I don't know. For some reason, that's why I said it. And we still kind of laugh about it a little bit. And, he's my friend. You didn't get him in the hole. But we all knew John. We all knew John McLaughlin because he was, we did a lot of training with him, even though he was in a separate police department. So I could barely see. I had debris in my eyes. I had debris in my mouth. I'm being helped down off the pile. Will's being brought down to an ambulance, and they take him to Bellevue Hospital. They get me to an ambulance, and all I'm worried about when I get to the ambulance, I said, don't cut my clothes off. Right? The first thing paramedics do is they cut your clothes off when you're laying in the street. I said, don't cut my clothes off. I'm a cop, and I have money to buy new ones. And so I said, I didn't break a bone. You don't need, my limbs are fine. I just can't breathe and I can't see. So they take me up to Bellevue Hospital. They wheel me into Bellevue Hospital. Well, let me backtrack a little bit now. I'm being helped off the pile. We get Will out. I'm being helped off the pile because I can't really see, and I'm incredibly exhausted. I've been up since about 7 o'clock on September 10th. This is around 11:30 midnight on September 11th. So it's way past 24 hours that I've been up, and obviously been working my rear end off, since then. I'm climbing down that pile and being helped by the rescuers, and I'm holding on to a police officer in front of me from my unit, and another guy behind me is holding on to me. And I'm in the volunteer fire department in Long Island. And that night was our company meeting night. And I hear this guy say to me, hey, I guess you didn't make the meeting either. And I had my eyes closed, and I'm just holding on to the cop in front of me. And I said, hey, Zeus, it's good to know that you're okay. And he says, how do you know it's me? I said, I can tell that voice anywhere. Yeah, this guy, Tom Olszewski, was in my fire department, and he's also a city firefighter for FDNY. He's got a very distinct voice. And so I knew it was him. And he says, how can you tell it's me? You can't see shit out of your eyes. And because I was covered and stuff. And I said, it's that voice, Zeus, I could pick that out anyway. And I said, yeah, it's good to see you're okay too, Scott. And go down to the pile, get to the ambulance. I tell him, don't cut my clothes off. I get to the hospital, and on the way, on the pile, as I'm on the trail coming off the debris pile, guys are pouring water on me. I'm trying to clean my eyes up. And I get into the ambulance, they're doing the same thing. I get to the hospital in Bellevue. Will's already in and being taken care of. And I get wheeled in, and my partner is there. My partner, Gerard Kirschler, is there. And Gerard retired from the police department in March of 2001. Unfortunately, on my birthday, but he retired. He was 6 months retired, heard what had happened in the city, digs out his old police uniforms, and he goes racing back to work. Now, he wasn't on the pile. He was in our building, answering phones and coordinating things out of our building. And he got word that his brother, who was also a police officer with us, got hurt, and they're bringing him to Bellevue. So he went to Bellevue, and it turns out they were talking about me. So they're wheeling me into Bellevue, and he says, "Hey, what are you doing here?" I go, "What am I doing here? You're retired. What are you doing here?" He says, "I wasn't missing this." And so he was in the hospital with me. Again, this is around midnight, I guess. I had lost my watch in the hole. I don't know what time it was. It doesn't really matter. But I got released sometime in the morning on September 12th. And I go back to my building on 21st Street. And there's a lieutenant there, and he says, the bosses in the police department are trying to get a handle on the operation. Nobody can work 24 hours a day for months and months, because that's obviously what this turned into. So they tried to break it up into 12-hour tours. So I get back to my building on 21st Street, and there's a lieutenant in there, and he says, "Hey, Scott, listen, I need you back here at 5 o'clock. And this is probably like 10 or 11 o'clock in the morning. And he says, either you go home or stay here, but I need you ready to go at 5. I said, "You know what, I'm going home. So I want to see my kids." This is September 12th in the morning. So I get home. I drove home because I drove in, and I take a shower. My wife's at work. I let her know I was home, and I'm trying to sleep. I can't sleep. I'm still hyped up. I want to get back. I've got to wait for my kids to get off the bus, but I wanted to see my boys. Bus pulls up. I get them off the bus. They give me big hugs. My wife comes home. I said, "Guys, I got to go back. I got to go back to work." And they were crying and holding on to me, asking me not to go because they didn't want me to die like the other people have died. They were 9 and 6 at the time. And I said, "I got to go back. I got to look for more people. I'm sorry." And they were begging me not to go, but I had to go. Said goodbye, didn't look back, and got in my car, and we went back to digging and looking, and we didn't find anybody else for weeks. Nobody else was found alive, just people that were dead, parts of people. What we saw was still haunts us to this day. But I helped bring 2 people home. John McLaughlin got out about 7 o'clock the next morning. Both of them are still doing well. John is struggling severely still, and this is 19 years later at this point. He still has open wounds. He still has issues. Will has issues, but they're alive. They saw their children grow up. They saw their children get on in life. I saw my kids, become police officers, both of them, in New York City Police Department. They graduated the police academy together. Tough time to be a cop right now, but I'm very proud of them. Always have been. And we continued searching for weeks and weeks and weeks and didn't find anybody. There was a point where we were driving down to the pile, and we're in a police van, and many of us had 15, 20, 10 years on the job and been through a lot. And certainly these several weeks right afterwards and several days, and the streets were lined with people applauding us and cheering us, and the patriotism for anybody that was alive then, because I know many of you listening to this probably weren't, the patriotism that was happening in America was incredible. I mean, we were one nation, we were one group, we were one. Nothing mattered except to focus on getting back on our feet. And it was just an amazing feeling. Flags were everywhere. People were cheering for us as police officers. When on September 10th, they were spitting on us. And, and it was just amazing. So there was one day we're driving in our van headed down to the trade center. And there were signs and people applauding us. And we're like, are we in a fire truck? Right? Because everybody loves a fireman. Everybody hates a cop. And so we're kind of laughing about it a little bit. And we're kind of making some jokes. And then there was like I said, the streets were lined with people. And there was one kid who was probably 7, 8 years old who had a sign. I said, please find my daddy. That brought us all back to remembering why we were headed down there. And I don't know if we ever found his father. I could tell you we didn't find him alive, but it was a tough time, real tough times. And the going to all those funerals were brutal. Afterwards, we lost 14 friends that day. Tough, but excuse me. The heroes of that day are the kids and the families. They still had to go on with school. They had to go on with life, even without their mother or their father. I don't know how they could do it, but they did it, and they're doing it. 19 years later, they're on with their lives. Not that they will ever forget. None of us will, what happened or what we went through. But hopefully, they're making their families proud, and I'm sure they are. And then, the course of the months went on, and they finished the recovery operation, and here we are. And I wish the day was different. I wish I didn't lose 14 friends. I wish 3,000 people weren't killed, and I wish we weren't getting sick now. But we are, and I want to thank the country for standing by us.
We can't help but hear your cough. I assume that cough is from 9/11. Can you share with us the health effects that you're still feeling today, close to 20 years later?
Yeah, I have. I can't take a deep breath any longer. The more I talk and the more I breathe, the more I cough. I'm on probably, I think it's 11 pills a day, 12 hits on 3 different inhalers a day, on a nebulizer 3 times a day. I've had 2 major surgeries, one on my sinus area and a major operation on my trachea, my bronchial tubes. My right lung is my bronchial tube on my right side starting to close up again. But I'm alive. I'm alive. I'm with my kids. I'm with my family. Many of my friends didn't have that opportunity. I'm good. If my life is cut short, which I'm sure it is, that's okay. I would do it again tomorrow if I had to. And so would every cop and firefighter and rescue worker that was there. And, everybody says, oh, the cops and the firefighters, it was a big rescue effort. Yeah, it was. But you know what? People were evacuating those towers before they collapsed. And it was New Yorkers helping New Yorkers. It was everyday citizens helping everyday citizens. Mrs. Jones was helping Mr. Smith. They weren't cowering underneath their desks on the 70th floor. They were helping each other get out of that building. It was a massive, massive rescue attempt by police officers, firefighters, construction workers who did a tremendous job, and the people in those buildings. They were helping each other. As the police officers and the firefighters were climbing the stairs, they were helping each other come down the stairs. It was a great humanitarian effort on all parts. It didn't matter what you looked like, what you did for a living, who you were. nothing mattered. The only thing mattered was people helping people, and that's what New Yorkers did. And the entire country came behind New York, Pennsylvania, and DC. And for all of the school kids who wrote cards and donated, had clothing drives and equipment drives and donated everything to us. Folks, we got that stuff. We got it. We had cards lining Trinity Church when we were taking breaks, and the days and weeks later, we're reading those cards of support. And thank you. So thank you. Thank you guys for everything that you guys did, and the entire nation for giving us the support and knowledge that we weren't alone, that the entire country was behind us in New York, Pennsylvania, and DC, because we couldn't have done it without you. So thank you guys.
I don't want to make you talk much more, but what you did, what saving those lives, wasn't that a movie?
Yeah. No. The movie, there was a movie made about Will and John, Will Jimeno and John McLaughlin, and the movie's titled The World Trade Center. And it's not about the rescue operation, it's about them. It's about them and their team, what they went through that day, and how they survived that day. The rescue part of it, obviously, is the end of it, where we get them out, but it's how they got through each other through. Talking about their families, talking about their lives, talking about the things that, excuse me, talking about the things that mattered most to them. Their faith and their love for their families is what got them through that day. That's what that movie's about. It's not about terrorists knocking the towers down. It's not about the rescue attempt. It's about them. It's a great human story.
Well, thank you, Scott. I'm sorry that I put you through this again. I know it's very hard to relive and physically what I just put you through. I apologize for that, but as we say, hashtag never forget.
Thank you for never forgetting. I'll be long gone, and hopefully these stories, unlike the stories of World War I that we had lost, we were trying to capture the stories of World War II and the veterans who were losing them daily. And there's very few of them left. Hopefully, through your efforts and other people's efforts that are doing things like this, these stories will never fade. And so thank you for doing it.
Well, thank you. You are an absolute true life hero. You show what a hero really is. And I know you say no, but yes, and thank you. And
I appreciate
and
it.
stay safe.
I worked with heroes. I'm not a hero. I worked with them. Thank you.
Thank you.